What you need to know is that salvation is by faith and faith alone in Jesus Christ. And faith alone in Jesus Christ is preceded and followed by repentance. A turning away from sin, a hatred for the things that God hates and a love for the things that God loves. A growing in holiness and a desire not to be like Britney Spears, not to be like the world, and not to be like the great majority of American Christians, but to be like Jesus Christ. I don't know why you're clapping. I'm talking about you.
Worship Christ because He's God. He's not like God. He's not close to God. He's not almost God. Jesus Christ is God.
Once I turned to Jesus and I realized how He had changed my outlook on life, not just softball, but understanding how much I have to live for, and that's living to exemplify the kingdom.
The Holy Spirit's in Elijah. The Holy Spirit's in Elisha. The Holy Spirit's in John the Baptizer. The Holy Spirit is in Jesus Christ. The Holy Spirit is in you if you belong to Jesus.
Let me have Christ whether I'm sick or well. Let me have Christ whether I'm rich or poor. Let me have Christ whether I'm alive or dead. Let me have Christ for my sins, and Christ for my guide, and Christ for my power, and Christ for my king.
Hello everyone, it is Monday night and we are here, the first ever stream on the newly monetized channel, because we just passed 1,000 subscribers over the weekend, so we are well over 1,000 and we are into monetization. So we'll see how long this lasts, because it may not last very long, especially here on YouTube. But we're back here, episode 3 of the Bible Lens podcast, and we're here tonight to talk about aliens, because that seems to be the topic of the town right now. But we have our lovely guests of, I don't know, infidels, if you want to call them, here on our show here tonight to talk about this issue. We're bringing everyone back. Our good buddy Johnny is here, conveniently in the abyss right now. How you doing, Johnny?
Good, Jacob. Just wanted to let you know I prefer the term Christian nationalist rather than infidel from now on.
That's going to have to be an episode in and of itself, the whole Christian nationalism thing. We'll get to that later on. But also joining us tonight, our good buddy Christian is back from a week off. How you doing today, Christian?
I'm good. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Cool. Yeah, I'm good.
Also joining us here, I guess he's having technical difficulties, but Blake is here.
Yes.
Over there. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm hiding in my mom's closet because, for those who don't know, my dad is actually the one who believes in all of this and trying to destroy our Christian faith. So I'm taking evasive maneuvers and just avoiding conflict. Welcome.
Oh boy. Well, I have to keep the either the mute button or the kick button on just in case something pops off over there. And then joining us somewhere in the same vicinity of Christian is Sam. How you doing today, Samantha?
I'm amazing. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well, and we have a bunch of people already joining us here tonight. We're on YouTube, we're on Rumble, and we're on Kick here tonight. So let's say hello to Leslie Tarkin joining us, saying hail to all you lovely people. That means hello in internet speak, so you can say hello.
Oh, hi.
Congrats on the 1,000 subs. Yeah, congrats on us too. Duke Nukem, who I know it says Nuke Dukem, that's the joke, don't correct me. It says that we are the aliens joining us here. And then it says, yeah, Paul Washer's sermon, Vody Bacham, John MacArthur. Yeah. Yeah, Duke, I can't wait for 2 weeks. That's all I'm going to say to you right now. I'm going to leave that to be a little bit of teaser for you for 2 weeks here. And then also joining us, Don't Let Him Burn says that Lucifer is the alien. He doesn't belong here. He was the first alien invasion. Look at all the results around you. We'll definitely hit on that topic here at the course of the night. So Obviously, we're here to talk about aliens because I don't know if you want to call this a psyop, a distraction, or essentially their way of preparing us for what's about to come next. So there's a lot of ways to look at this story. We're going to try to cover all of the perspectives of this alien phenomenon here that we possibly can in a 90-minute window. But let me go ahead and start with you. I think we should start with Blake since he seems to be the most adequate with this alien conspiracy here. Before we get into any context, if anything was going on, what is your general view of aliens and how the world perceives aliens to be? I'll start with you.
I can't. Oh, I would rather. I don't know how much I want to get into versus how much I'll even remember right now. But this is all a theme of Yahweh versus Babylon, essentially. The whether you want to call them the Vimana, whether you want to call no, thank you, whether you want to call them the Vimana, the Anunnaki, it is clear that people in ancient civilizations for many, many, many generations have been able to see spirits or fallen angels or aliens, and whichever one, however we perceived it, that's what we called it at the time. What we're seeing is people looking back into history, seeing the history of the Anunnaki in Mesopotamian areas like Sumeria, and saying, "Wow, look at the connections from there to here." However, from a Christian lens, it's very, very clear that that could very well be demons, as we spoiler are going to be talking about. However, when you're not taking this from a theistic lens, it's even easier to just disregard it as this has nothing to do with God. This has nothing to do with God's little g. This has to do with evolved beings because we couldn't have been created by intelligent design. It's just people who are more evolved than us, and they've been watching us for centuries and centuries. And the idea is either that a mothership is going to come and take people, or they're going to give us a better life with their evolved technology and their evolved way of running a society. And essentially, it's the same idea that humans are corrupted, but it's because we're just not as advanced as they are. And that's a theme that in a pattern you'll see occurring over and over and over again. And you can see how evolution just plays right into this of, we were just evolved, and, we could have been created by the Anunnaki. Therefore, we were created for their purposes, and we should possibly be told to eventually bow to them and serve them because they are our gods. So that is what I'm seeing a lot, and my house is now filled with books about the pyramids, books about Tesla coils, and how that connects to us being an inferior race to the deities up there.
That was actually a much better answer than I was expecting out of you. Matter of fact, for that, I'm going to give you top square to just for that answer, celebration there. So that totally wasn't intentional to have all the men on the top and all the women on the bottom. So don't read into it. So,
well, I'm glad I set my bar low.
Oh yeah, right. Johnny, good luck following that.
Yeah, it is a tough follow. I think it's just repackaged demonic deception, kind of like Blake said. Throughout the Bible, all the ancient non-Israelite civilizations had their own names for gods, and those gods were actually very clearly demons, since they weren't Jesus, they weren't God the Father or the Holy Spirit. And today, folks are just calling them aliens. It seems to be pretty easy to deceive the world over and over again if you just change the names of whatever object of worship. But yeah, kind of like Blake said as well, I'm definitely on board with aliens being used to cover up the rapture. I think that's coming up soon, and I've listened to some interviews recently that say even the people in contact with these aliens say that the aliens are like predicting that they're gonna like take up all of the Christian leaders of the world. So I'm interested to see how the world reacts to that, but hopefully I'm not here to see it. Hopefully I'm one of those, Christians taken up.
That'll be great because if we don't, then what's coming next is going to be not great. Let's just put it that way. Christian, what's kind of your general perspective on how you've always viewed aliens?
Um, I think it's evolved throughout my life. I think at the beginning it was like this idea of like ET and something cool and a fun thought, and it would be a fun conversation to have over a bonfire with your friends. But now that I've grown closer with Christ, and one of the things I've learned is one of my favorite, my dad's favorite book is called The Return of the Gods. So kind of piggyback off of what Johnny had to say is that, it's really just at the end of the day, it's like the demonic, trying to find a way into modern society. So that's probably where I stand is that. And I really do believe that it just seems to be perfect timing of, if the rapture does occur here in the next few years, then they can have something to blame on the missing people.
Sam, do you agree with that point?
Yeah, no, I think so. I mean, I've been kind of thinking that for a while. First time I thought anything about it, I had a friend who was super into aliens 3 years ago. And he avidly believed that they exist and the abduction stories were real, and he was super into it. And I thought that if they were real, it would be some sort of demonic deception where I mean, the alien abduction stories are pretty linear, pretty parallel with what you hear about demonic encounters. So I think that's what we're seeing. A lot of people in the more secular sphere will make fun of us for believing that. But, if something happens, if that is the mass deception that's talked about in Revelation, I mean, I think that's pretty much where it's going to go is people get abducted by aliens. So I think I'm pretty much
long ago.
Yeah, go for it, Blake.
I was just going to say long ago, people would look at the alien believers as the weirdos. And now it's time that we go through like 4 years of realizing, well, more than that, of course, but 4 very turbulent years of seeing we can't trust our government. We can't trust other governments. We can't trust the world government that's forming. And then suddenly they say the magic words, and I was like, oh, I guess they're aliens now. Cool. We should trust them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
especially
like
after everything that's happened over the last 3 years. It's like, oh, now they're really telling us the truth. Finally, it's like, okay.
Those very same venomous teeth, those very same venomous tongues that are spreading all these lies that people who are not theistic can still see. Suddenly those very same mouths are saying blah 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 blah. Oh, okay, cool. Well, that is great to know. Thank you, government. I love Big Brother.
Yeah, I think it's interesting the way that the information is being presented because there are whistleblowers coming out saying there's all this hidden information about the aliens, but when you look into it, it's really not that hidden. The government itself has released documents about Area 51 and alien encounters, things like that. So it seems like we're getting a steady stream of release of information that's setting us up for something more. And suddenly people are talking about it. It's on social media. The timing just seems interesting.
Yeah, and you bring up a great point, and this is where I think that people really need to start paying attention to what's happening here, because this whole thing with aliens didn't just start here in the last couple of weeks. You remember a few months ago, there was these top stories going around talking about, oh, these balloons are just all over the United States. We don't know exactly what's going on here, but I mean they're not identified, so they were kind of setting you up there. And now this is the next progression. And the reason why I say you have to pay attention to what's going on here is because if you guys remember, roughly about 10 years ago or so, there was this really big push within the media talking about people who were against vaccines, right? And it wasn't talking about the COVID vaccine, but if you remember, if you were watching television shows, news outlets, stuff like that, there was this whole push about, oh, well, there's this new age of parents out there who don't agree with giving their children the polio vaccine or the Hep A vaccine and other types of vaccines. And kind of the reaction to that was like, oh, well, thanks to these people polio is going to come back now because they're not doing like the right thing. And it's a very weird story that I remember. And I had a friend of mine who lived in San Diego, I think she's still there at the time, who didn't want to vaccinate her kids. So we talked about this whole issue a lot. This is several years ago. And I find it very interesting that that was years before what would occur in 2021, where everyone's been shut down for about a year. And then all of a sudden, here comes, Moderna, here comes Pfizer with, hey, we have a vaccine that's going to help you and save you, and go take the vaccine right now because it's safe and effective. And the people who disagreed with that pretty much got lambasted and attacked and ridiculed the same way that those people from several years ago was. So I have to think to myself, looking back on that moment, it's like, was it possible that the whole anti-vax narrative that existed 10 years ago was pretty much preparing people to what was going to occur several years later? Because they're in the mindset of, well, if you don't get vaccinated, you're a bad person. You're going to bring polio back. You don't be that person, do you? And now all of a sudden, Big Pharma comes up with their newish shiny little object, and it's like, hey, you guys want to go get this thing? Because if you don't get it, you're a bad person. Remember, we told you that years ago. So I always look at it, it's like, if the government is telling us something now, that usually means that something's coming down the line. We don't know exactly what it is, but something's definitely coming. But I think we start the heart of this issue with aliens. So start off where this whole thing started. And I think the most people who generally believe in the idea of aliens, or let's just call them extraterrestrials, that they generally, I'm not saying all, but most generally reject the book of Genesis. And when we talk about the book of Genesis, we're talking about the very first book in the Old Testament that describes how we all got here in the first place. So I'll go ahead and bring this up here for a second. We'll just read a little bit of the book of Genesis here for a second. See if I can make this a little bit closer so you guys can read it a little bit easier here. But this is Genesis 1, and this is the New King James Version, because like I said, it's my show. I'm going to read the version I like the most. And so Genesis 1 says that in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void and darkness, and was on the face of the deep, the Spirit of God hovering over the waters here. I'm going to continue just a little bit down because we want to get a kind of general sense of this. And then God said, let there be light. And then there was light. And then God saw the light, and it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. God called the light day. He called, and the darkness he called night. So the evening, the morning was the first day. And then God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let there divide the waters from the waters. God made the firmament, divided the waters which were under the firmament, and then under the waters which were above the firmament, and it was so. Good. And then God called the firmament heaven. It says, so for the evening to the morning of the second day, God said, let the waters under the heavens gather together in one place. Let it be dry land up here. And then it was so. God said that. Keep in mind, there's a theme here that God's literally speaking the world or the universe into existence. But God called the dry land earth, and He gathered together the waters and called it the seas. And God said that it was good. God said that let the earth bring forth grass, the herb that yields seeds, the fruit that yields fruit according to its kind, and whose seeds in of itself on the earth. And it was so. There was it said, and then the earth brought forth grass and herbs that yield the seed according to this kind, and then the tree that yields the fruit, the seed of it in of itself according to its kind. God saw that it was good, and the evening and the morning were the third day. So this goes on. It basically tells you how the world came into existence. Now, if you look at the problem here, and it's not the problem with the scriptures in itself, but ever since the book of Genesis was created, there are people who have fundamentally disagreed and outright denied that this is how the world came to be. And we had a very interesting conversation about this yesterday in our Encouragers class. But real quick, before I go any further, I do want to welcome in our good buddy Rylan, who's joining us in right now, listening to that. So I don't know how much you caught there, but we're basically just explaining Genesis 1, talking about the origins of the world. And when it comes to like a lot of people, scientists, and let's just say general unbelievers, they'll outright deny that this is how the world was formed. They don't believe that this is how the Earth began. So they came up with theories such as, the Big Bang. They had, we talked about multiple theories yesterday. It's like, oh, the world just, it expanded one day, then it contracted, and we were just here. Like, that's how the world ended, or the world started, I should say. And I think the problem with a lot of people, especially over the years, is that the denial of Genesis has always led to the question, well, what was the starting point? And I think for a lot of scientists and a lot of unbelievers, they generally have to acknowledge that there was a starting point, but they don't want to admit that the starting point was God. Because I think by acknowledging that God created the world and there is in fact a God, that means that they would have to, follow some of the rules that God laid down for humanity, and they don't really want to do that. So they try to find whatever way they can justify or deny his existence. And because of this, over the course of, I guess you could say, centuries, 100 centuries, a couple of millenniums, we've built this idea of extraterrestrials, aliens, these things that are in space that, we can't see because they're too far away. But the argument generally is that, hey, well, space is so big. I mean, who are we to say that they're not aliens out there? I mean, we can't find any of them. I mean, we can't even find a planet that can inhabit Earth, not even Earth, but humanity. Like, we can't just go to Mars and start, a civilization there. We can't go to Neptune and start a civilization there because they don't have the ability to sustain life the way that we do here on Earth. And people have generally just accepted this, as silly as it sounds. I mean, it sounds more sillier now when you actually start really going into the arguments of such things, but this is what generally has been believed for a long time. And because of that, people don't even really realize that their concept of quote unquote aliens have essentially come from popular media. It's come from the idea of, oh, well, I've seen aliens in TV shows for decades. We've heard people talk about it on the news and movies and stuff like that. And that's generally the idea of what we hear, quote unquote, aliens. Now, there's people who say, well, if you look at, the pyramids, they had certain things. We'll talk about all that. But I'm going to go ahead and show you guys the first clip that I have here. And this is what started everything. This was a hearing that happened last week where government officials finally have admitted, at least publicly admitted, that they have in fact made contact with aliens, and they even have alien bodies and they have alien ships in their possession. So this is what they said here. I'm going to play this and kind of get your reaction to it. Oh, it's Twitter. Yeah, it's Twitter. No.
Still Twitter.
Yeah. I'm sorry. It's X now. It's not Twitter. Let's try that again.
Intelligent extraterrestrials.
Something I can't discuss in public setting.
Okay, I can't ask when you think this occurred. If you believe we have crashed craft, stated earlier, do we have the bodies of the pilots who piloted this craft?
As I've stated publicly already in my News Nation interview, biologics came with some of these recoveries. Yeah.
Were they, I guess, human or non-human biologics?
Non-human, and that was the assessment of people with direct knowledge on the program I talked to that are currently still on the program.
And was this documentary evidence, this video, photos, eyewitness? Like, how would that be determined?
The specific documentation I would have to talk to you in a skiff about.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. So, and you may or may not be able to answer my last question, and maybe we get into a skiff at the next hearing that we have, but who in the government, either what agency, sub-agency, what contractors, who should be called into the next hearing about UAPs, either in a public setting or even in a private setting? And you probably can't name names, but what agencies or organizations, contractors, et cetera, do we need to call in to get these questions answered, whether it's about funding, what programs are happening, and what's out there?
I can give you a specific cooperative and hostile witness list of specific individuals that were in those.
And how soon can we get that list?
I'm happy to provide that to you after the hearing.
Super. Thank you. And I yield back.
So that was the clip of the hearing there, which confirmed that, hey, the government has finally acknowledged that aliens exist. So there was three reactions to this. There was three very different reactions. You had the one group of people who have always bought into the idea of aliens that are like, hey, you know what? The government has finally confirmed what I've always known. I always believed in aliens. You had the second group of people who was like, okay, you're confirming aliens now all of a sudden, and we're just supposed to believe you? Like, what's going on? There has to be some sort of setup going on here. Maybe you guys are prepping us for something that's going to happen down the road. And then you have the third group of people, and I'm not going to sit here and say that these people are crazy, but there's a third group of people out there that have said, you know what, this is just a complete distraction. None of this is actually legitimate. Because apparently on the exact same day that this happened, Mr. FTX, Sam Bankman-Fried, had all of his charges dropped for campaign finance fraud. This is the guy who was in charge of that cryptocurrency giant that came literally out of nowhere, and then last year just somehow ran out of people's money. And this is a guy who built a fortune of like $20 billion, like seemingly overnight. Then all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, money's gone. Oops. And then this was him literally on the same day, quietly announcing that the charges have been dropped.
Are you changing your plea?
Mr. Bankman-Fried,
Why make the contact?
Are you worried you're going to prison?
Yeah, he looks like a demon. I'm just throwing that out there, but that's other days. So the question here that we're going to be asking throughout the course of this night is that who's really telling the truth here? What is the deal here? Are there really extraterrestrial beings? Is there something else going on here behind the scenes? So I think we're going to start off here by playing some clips throughout the course of this night about people who have claimed at one point or another to have been visited by extraterrestrials, or at least have spoken to extraterrestrials. Now, some of you guys might not have known this, but the little clip that I showed you from last week, that's not the first time that someone has publicly made comments that we have received communication from aliens. Now, this one is from a hearing, I believe, about 10 years ago. This is April 2013. This is former Canadian defense, defense premier or minister, Paul Halen, who made a claim that, that they had contacted aliens, and that aliens basically gave them a referendum for, how humanity needs to, let's just say, proceed in order to, let's just say, exist. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and play this one. Now, pay close attention to what he's claiming these aliens said to him, because some of the things that are going on in our world right now may make a little bit more sense if you hear exactly what he's proclaiming, and listening out for red flags here as well. So let's play this video.
Indulge me, I'd like to read 2 pages from advice from the extraterrestrials. Yes, it's true that we have been in contact with your government and heads of power. It is also true that it is also true that agreements have been made and kept secret from your people. It is also true that in the past, some of your people have lost their lives or have been badly hurt to protect the secret. Our hands had no part in this. We contacted your leaders because your planet is in grave trouble. Your leaders said the vast majority of your population wasn't ready for anything like us yet. So we made time agreements with your leaders as to when your people would be made aware of our presence. Your air, your water are contaminated. Your forests, jungles, trees, and plant life are dying. There are several breaks in your food chain. You have an overwhelming amount of nuclear and biological weapons, which include nuclear and biological contamination. Your planet is overpopulated. Warning, it is almost to the point of being too late, unless your people act. There are better ways of deriving energy and food needs without causing your planet any damage. Those in power are aware of this and have the capability of putting these methods into worldwide use. Those in power view it as a military and security threat. That upset me. You mean to tell me that the people in power have the ability to save and better the planet, and they aren't doing it? Amnesty. What do you mean? Complete amnesty to those in power, governments and leaders who have been suppressing the truth, that they can't be held liable for any past wrong deeds. It is the only way these leaders can come forward with the truth. It is necessary that you do this in order to work together and survive.
So there's a little video there. So if you caught some of the things that he was saying there, he was saying that, well, yeah, well, we've had conversations with aliens in the past, and they essentially told us that, hey, our world is doomed. It's like our waters are being poisoned, like the air is being polluted. Hey, the world's overpopulated. That's a problem too. You guys should definitely look into stuff like that. So. And if you notice what he's saying there in that letter, it's like there's a lot of things that have been promoted over the course of the last 10 years, especially associated with the climate agenda, that pretty much mirror exactly what he claims that these aliens told the world leaders that they've been in contact with for quite some time. Now, we're going to dig a lot deeper into that because I know it may sound weird, but I actually believe him, but I might not believe him for the exact reason that you guys think that I believe him. Let's go ahead and start off with you guys here. Rylan, I'll start with you. What's kind of your general reaction here to essentially the world's governments essentially admitting that, hey, we've been in contact with alien beings for a long time, and we've been relaying communication and kind of policies here for the last several years in secret that we haven't told you guys about yet?
I like what Small Time Republic says. He says, apparently a skiff hearing means our tax dollars still don't entitle us to know what's going on. It's like, okay, good. I'm paying however much percentage of my taxes, and I get to watch this guy just say, yeah, there are stuff, but I can't say it. It's like, did we not just grow up from being kids? Where that's like, I have a secret, but I'm not going to tell you what the secret is because it's just like, and by like that rationale, you think the aliens would really want to talk to somebody of that intelligence who's just like, yeah, I just don't want to say it. Like, no, like, and on the course
Since
of, like,
you really want to know, essentially what just happened.
Yeah, but it's like, I just think it's funny how like they think that they're so powerful that some aliens are gonna want to like talk to them, even though, and they talk about like depopulation and all this stuff. Like, well, wouldn't aliens want more people on the planet in the first place so they could do more experiments on them and do what these people say have been happening to them? Like, wouldn't they want to find out more information on them? They wouldn't be like, oh, your water's contaminated. It's like, no, like, honestly, I feel like if these aliens were real, they'd be watching us like we watch an ant farm. And just
Dude, that's hilarious.
Yeah, like.
Yeah, it seems
I
pretty
honestly,
complicated.
I was
Go
just
ahead.
gonna say it just sounds stupid as shit. Like it pisses me off just to see that guy talk because I was like, clearly, first of all, why aren't we seeing a video of them being like, oh yeah, we want this, this, and this, and this from your leaders? Like it's just them saying this is what they have to say, and it's clearly the agenda from the leftists for the past like 10 years. Why are all the aliens agreeing with the leftist agenda to feed more fear? And it makes me so mad. I hope nobody actually believes this.
They do.
Who believes this?
Like I said, I actually believe him, but like I said, I'll reveal to you guys exactly why I believe him because there's another part of this story here that we'll talk about here that kind of.
Do you believe that he believes what he says? Is that what you're saying?
I believe that there are high-ranking officials who do talk to certain entities about world policies, and we'll keep it there for now.
Yeah,
I believe that he believes what he's saying is true because he's probably brainwashed by MK Ultra, but whatever. That's the story.
Or he's just like senile and just does what he's told so he can get an extra paycheck.
Yeah,
like everybody else in our government.
It's insane to me that they think that they can just come out here and tell us that, oh yeah, this is the whole truth. We've been lying to you for decades, but this is really the real whole truth. To me, it seems like they're holding back information on who these people or these aliens actually are. They're calling them extraterrestrial, from another planet. I think they know full well that they're demons. They're just not telling us that. And that is part of, the deception here.
Oh, absolutely. This is like one of the ultimate deceptions of all time. And that's where we know that we're going to be raptured soon. But that being said, is like they've been here for a long time and they're just now deciding it's a good time for us to say something. That doesn't even make sense. Like, it's so stupid.
So I want to get into this one because this is going to kind of lead us down this road that we're going to start here. So if you noticed, there was a map that was circulating on social media saying that, hey, it's kind of weird that if you go by the reported map of these so-called alien sightings that you have seen all across the world, a lot of it is here in the United States. A few of it's in Europe. There's some stuff in Europe as well too, but it's like, it's really weird that it seems to be wherever the most secular parts of the world is that you have the most reported encounters of UFO activities or UFO sightings throughout the entire world. So obviously, we've been making the implication here that a lot of these connections with aliens are actually demonic in nature. And people are to say, well, why you guys keep saying that? Why you keep saying that aliens are actually demons? How can they can't be truly aliens? Keep in mind, if you reject Genesis 1, then you reject the idea of demons actually existing in the first place. So in your mind, there can't possibly be any demonic activity because you've rejected God and you rejected exactly what the Bible says. Well, I'm going to go ahead and play this video here. We'll play a little bit of this, not the whole thing, but this is a woman who was big into, I guess you can say, attempting to contact aliens, and we'll hear a little bit about her backstory and about what led to her experience here. So I'll go ahead and play this video here, and she can listen to her describe her experiences with aliens and which led her to that point.
Grew up going to church, at least. I didn't really have an understanding at all of the gospel or who Jesus really is, but I had some form of Christian knowledge. But when I had this experience, I started to go away from it because I thought, well, I've never heard anyone talk about this, and the places that I've heard this talk about are more in talking about the universe or more talking about just spiritualness rather than Christianity. And so that kind of drew me in this other direction, where by the time I got to high school, I started getting into the book The Secret, which talked about manifesting, and that gave me more of this, we are part of the universe, we are part of this bigger thing. And then growing up, I started making my own Ouija boards because I just really wanted to continue having these experiences, these supernatural experiences, because growing up hiding so many of the things that were happening to me, and then trying to stuff it all down and feeling this sense of like, these entities see me and they know me and I feel special. I continued down that direction.
I just want to pause there for a second because this is something that I've been talking about for quite some time. I've been trying to warn people against. It's like this idea that everyone wants to have a supernatural experience, whether they believe in any kind of religion or they don't believe in any kind of religion. And you always hear this term that's thrown around here all the time: spirituality. And what you've noticed here is that these people who put personal experiences and personal things that they've encountered in their life over any kind of sound doctrine. And what people don't really realize about stuff like this is that it really is like, a drug dealer giving you a free hit of, let's say a drug dealer giving you your first hit of cocaine or something like that, right? He'll give you the first hit for free because he'll even give you like the best stuff that he has available, because he knows that the second that he can hook you, you're going to come back for more. And that first time you have that supernatural experience and you're asking so many questions like, oh, what is that? I need to get more into this. And you're going to start going back more. And then when you realize that, well, the second hit isn't as strong as that first hit, I want to go back and find that first hit that I really got to. And then the next thing you know, you're going deeper and you start searching for things that you probably shouldn't be searching for. And the next thing you know, before you've even realized it, you pretty much open the door to something to, let's just say, make a bigger mark on your life than you probably would like to have on there. Is that a safe assumption? Am I kind of just rambling on there? Or am I kind of in the ballpark with that one?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's exactly how the devil works. That's how he gets you come back for more.
Yeah,
So.
all about that dragon chase. Just chasing that dragon. That's it.
So,
it's kind of.
Go ahead.
Who's talking? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go ahead, Rebecca.
Okay, it's kind of like what I said originally in the last podcast, Jacob, about like what you're dealing with is when it comes to Jesus and Christianity, it's going to be spiritual. And sometimes people, that's why lukewarm Christianity is so dangerous, is because like when you deal with the spirit realm, that's why it's so important to have discernment as well, because we do crave things spiritually. We are spiritual beings. And at the end of the day, it's like you have to have discernment, because the devil comes in the spirit of light, or whatever it's called, and you have to know the difference between him and honestly the Holy Spirit. So
And, Leslie, we were actually having this completely different conversation about the Mary sightings about maybe like a week or two ago, because obviously Catholics really put a lot of weight onto these sightings of Mary. Keep in mind, not talking about sightings of Jesus, but sightings of Mary that have happened like all around the world. And people apparently don't read scripture as much as they should have, because I think it's what 2 Corinthians 11 13 through 15. It says that for such people, false apostles, deceitful workers, masquerading as apostles for Christ, no wonder for Satan himself masquerades as an angel of light. It's not surprising that his servants also masquerade as servants of righteousness. This is a big part of why in the Bible it says test the spirits. Don't just assume that everything you're talking to is of God or of a friendly nature, because a lot of the times they're not. And this is a kind of a dangerous game people play with, like dreams and stuff like that too, because they'll read in the Bible, it's like, oh well, God spoke to certain people throughout dreams, and angels talk to people throughout dreams. It's like, yeah, well, guess what, demons can also contact you throughout dreams as well. So that's why it's even more important that you have to test these spirits before you just take everything that they go say as gospel, because like I said, you might not be interacting with something that you think you're interacting with. And this girl here found out very quickly that she was interacting with something that she shouldn't have been. So
good, she got
getting
saved.
a lot more into New Age and occult beliefs, and so I started doing guided meditations where I would want to have relationships with entities that were my spirit guides that could lead me deeper into spiritual awakening. And for me, that for the most part showed as alien entities, because that's what was familiar to me. And then
So that would be like little men with big heads and big eyes. Is that what you're talking about?
For me, it was like taller, the gray aliens that are popular with the big black almond-shaped eyes. And when I was having these guided meditations, even now it sounds so strange, but for me, these experiences that I was having were more real to me than my normal waking life. They were such a big part of who I was. And so continuing down this path, I started channeling, automatic writing, going into these trance-like states with meditation to get more and more, almost like an addiction. I wanted more of these experiences. I wanted the relationship that I had with these entities to grow and grow, and started using psychedelic drugs almost other than as an escape, additionally to get into these altered states of consciousness where I could go into deeper dives and deeper experiences with these entities. And this whole time, it wasn't innocent in terms of, it's not like they ever led me to the truth, the true Christ of the Bible. It was continuously seeds of doubt in, okay, well, if this is real, then the Bible doesn't talk about aliens and they're actually good, and really starting to invert good and bad. Like they always had this terrifying, like I felt terrified, even as a child, hiding from the windows when I would think I saw them, terrified, but this deep sense of, again, familiarity or connection and fascination, like a draw towards these things that continued to draw me into belief systems that were more and more aligned with the occult.
So I do want to point that out because that's a very important part of this story too. And as we'll play here with some other stories throughout the course of this night, you notice that the growing theme is that, whenever they are around, these beings that they believe to be aliens, there's always a sense of fright, unknowingness, being afraid, anxiety, stuff like that. And you'll see this like commonly, like, oh, I encountered this thing and I just felt such dread and such unevenness. Well, first of all, like I said, if you believe the Bible, and there's some scriptures there that talks about this, when you're in the presence of an angel, right, or a heavenly being, what's usually the first thing that being will tell you, right? Does anyone know? Let's put
Do not be afraid.
Exactly, right? Because you see this thing and your immediate reaction is to freak out because of an alien, not an alien, but an angel just popped up in front of you. You've never seen anything like this before. Your first reaction would be to, holy crap, I'm panicking, I'm losing my mind. But as every angel in the Bible that says that do not be afraid, they'll basically give you a sense of calm that, hey, he's not here to hurt you. But when they talk about testing spirits, anything that is not heavenly will not do that for you. And what you get is just this overwhelming sense of paranoia, of anxiety, of fear. And the two big red flags with a lot of these stories is always fear and anxiety, because I can tell you that right now, those two feelings do not come from heavenly beings whatsoever. They even specifically says that we do not give you those feelings. So if you do feel something like that, it's definitely not from anything from above. It's probably something from below. But let me ask you guys this. Who here knows Demi Lovato?
Oh, duh.
Yeah.
Never
So
once.
Demi
What
Lovato.
question was that, Jacob?
It's called a lead-in, but but as we know, Demi Lovato has gone through a pretty rough life. I think we could say. I mean, this is a poor girl who almost died from a heroin addiction a number of years ago. She's admitted that she got raped in the industry. She's abused drugs. She's abused alcohol. I mean, the Hollywood lifestyle has not been kind to her. But let's be honest, the Hollywood lifestyle has not been kind to a lot of people over the last number of years. But I remember an interview she did with Kelly Clarkson not too long ago. This was in the promotional stage of this movie that she was doing where she was trying to contact aliens. Now, I'm not going to play all of this, but I do want to put just a little small portion of this, at least as much as we can play on here, because like I said, you're going to start noticing a theme with like a lot of these encounters, and you noticed it here as well. So let's play Demi Lovato describing her experiences with the alien world.
I did it for a crazy experience that I had. I had a night where I was dreaming, and I say dreaming very loosely because I don't really know what happened, but I all of a sudden was in my room, and I know I said, I sound like, this is gonna sound so out there, but just bear with me. So I woke up in my room, and there was like 3 beings. And they were like, do you want to see your planet? And I was like, oh, sorry. So
You were like, hell yeah.
I was like, hell yeah, let's go. So
I just wanted to just notice one thing right off the bat here. It's like, notice when she said that there was 3 beings in her room, nobody was like, oh, that doesn't sound good. Like all this, oh yeah, that must have been exciting. It's like, notice how they portrayed it as she's telling the story. It's like anyone else with righteous ears would be like, okay, there's multiple red flags going on here, but she's gonna continue.
So I like whooshed out of my room and was like hovering over the planet, and then all of a sudden they're like, you want to see our planet? And I was like, hell yeah. So then I whooshed to this like pink and purple planet that I've never seen, so that with the hypnotherapy, I was like trying to figure out what exactly that was. Was it like, I don't want to use the word abduction because that implies that it wasn't with consent. I was totally for it. You know what I'm saying?
Hell yes.
So I can't call it like an abduction. I called it an astral projection for a long time because I went somewhere else.
Yeah.
But then I realized maybe this was just an encounter that I had.
Yeah.
And I talk about that on the show.
And we'll stop there for a second, because if you notice, the last girl mentioned like the same thing, like going through these occult practices, and you'll hear the term astral projection used a lot throughout the course of this night. And we started asking ourselves, when people talk about these alien encounters, we've kind of viewed it in the way that we view it in, like, say, the media or in these movies, television shows, where a big giant ship just appears out of the sky, then all of a sudden I got sucked into the ship, and that's kind of like our interpretation of alien abduction. Well, if you hear about these people who are claiming that they had contact with aliens, it doesn't exactly go down that way. And it's not just, aliens just appeared to me one day out of the blue. It was like, okay, I was dealing with something that I probably shouldn't have been dealing with, and the next thing you know, I just got contacted by these beings, people who I was seeking out, probably shouldn't have been seeking out. And then this is where the encounter starts. And when people get, like I said, it's like the crack addict, you get a little bit of taste of these experiences and you immediately want more. You'd be like, oh, you want more information, you want more guidance. It's like, okay, well, why don't you follow these books, why don't you follow these practices, and we'll give you more and we'll show you more. And like I said, this is not the first time that you heard this, and you'll hear this as a recurring theme throughout the course of the night. But Johnny, I'm going to start with you with this one. If you notice, outside of the astral projection part, if you also notice like another disturbing trend with a lot of these stories so far of alien abductions or contacts here.
Yeah, I feel like one trend is like they want to show people the truth. And I don't know, the truth just seems to be lies in every respect, you know, like I personally, you know, the book of Genesis doesn't mention other planets. I'm not saying that they aren't out there, but you know, the book of Genesis says there's lights in the sky, the greater light and the lesser light, the sun and the moon, you know. And when we were looking at the you know, alien advice, you know, all the advice was how to make the world look like the book of Revelation. Like how, you know, your waters are contaminated, you know, like you're in the book of Revelation, the waters are turned to blood and they're bitter, you know. Matthew 24 tells us if those days were not shortened, if the days of the tribulation were not shortened, no flesh would survive. And here the aliens are preaching you know, a depopulation agenda. It seems like the greater theme is just lies told as the truth, you know.
Yep. Do you agree with that one, Christian?
You know, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So Demi Lovato is a really sad person to me because I know that the Lord has put it on my heart to pray for her for the past like few years or so. And I know that she's struggling a lot, and she basically what she did is gave consent to the demonic to possess her. Honestly, that's what she just did, and she admitted to that. And when you astral project, that's part of witchcraft. That's a real thing. I know people who have done it before. And I mean, that's little witchcraft. And so I just feel like it makes me so sad. And again, you know, when she came out with her album, like it said holy, you know, the bad word. And it's almost like complete blasphemy against Jesus. And she said that she was a Christian. She got baptized in the Jordan River, and then she came out with this album. So I feel like
Deception, essentially another form of deception. It's like, oh, I'm saved, I found the Lord, and the very next thing you do is absolutely blasphemous. It seems to happen a lot in Hollywood.
It does. And it, you know, one of the things that I've noticed for me at least, and I'm really grateful to God, you know, that I wasn't famous, but when I got baptized a year ago, and afterwards I feel like I hit more spiritual warfare than I ever had in my entire life. And like that's a different story, but like I just feel like she probably hit a lot of spiritual warfare after she got baptized, because that was the closer you get to God, the harder the devil will fight for you. So I think that's kind of what's happened to her.
And you got to recognize what she's playing with too, because she also have y'all seen that video where she like went to go sing to ghosts?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So that's what she's playing with. I mean, she's really clearly she has a draw to the spiritual, and it's unfortunately just not playing out in a way that's healthy or safe. I mean, she was even drawn to get baptized in the Jordan River. There's a lot of push and pull there, but this is where it led her. And it's so easy when you're playing with that stuff to be deceived and to get to this point. And what's interesting to me is the fact that the deception that you're allowing in the spiritual is leading to the point of accepting that aliens are real and that there are these alien encounters. It's kind of Kind of just crazy.
You have to keep in mind too, all of these people are, especially in Hollywood, when you're in that Los Angeles and New York bubble, they're all secular people. They all don't believe in God, or even worse, they believe in something else. But these are not people who are. She has nobody in that town who will teach her like in the right direction. This is pretty much the reality of it. Is like they all think like her. They all think like the same thing. So she's talking about all these alien encounters, and because she's not around someone who's actually like of God, like the stuff that she's saying is not gonna ring somebody's ears. But like, wait, you astral projected, and then you got contact with aliens, because that doesn't sound right at all. Because based on the book that I read, this means that you had an encounter of something that was far more sinister than you're leading on here. But it's like, no, it was consensual. I mean, I totally wanted to do it. It's like, yeah, that's the problem. Like, do you not see like the connection there? But in that town, which he, like I said, Kelly Clarkson sitting over there, so I'm like, oh my God, that's so amazing. 3 of them, wow. It's like, that's the type of reaction that
She's
they get
a good person too, so it's kind of sad to hear that.
Well,
yeah, I know.
She may have been a good person. I'm not sure
No,
if she's still a
she
good
tries
person.
to be.
I mean, they all try to be good people. That's what I'm saying. Like, prayer is so important at this time, you guys. Especially when we believe that the rapture is happening, we have to pray for everybody, including these famous people.
Mm-hmm. Or Rylan, what's kind of your thoughts on a lot of the stuff that's going on here?
I mean, I feel like ever since she did the heroin, it's just kind of been downhill. Personally,
Yeah.
I mean, I remember listening to her on the Joe Rogan podcast, and like, she was kind of coming out of that, and then she wasn't as deep into all that witchcraft stuff that she is now, but she was like getting on the right path, and I definitely can see how somebody of that caliber can just get right there and then take it right off, because you were kind of already there. But if you try to do something good, I mean, that Satan's going to pull you back even harder, like what Christian said. I mean, and some people are strong enough to hold back, and some people aren't. And I think being in the acting industry is definitely not helping her case.
There's one thing that I wanted to bring up too, because if you notice, she also happened to bring up drug use and psychedelic drugs specifically, about how she would go to, I guess, contact these beings and stuff like that. And this isn't the first time that I've heard this, and we've heard this a lot of times. So I'm going to go ahead and ask you guys. I'm pretty sure you guys are aware of heard the name DMT being used in popular media somewhere of the last couple of years, right?
Yep.
So if you are a big fan of like the Joe Rogan podcast, he talks about this all the time. There's a lot of people within that Hollywood sphere who do this. DMT is a psychedelic drug that a lot of people take. Some people take it with shamans, which should be your first red flag about drugs of this nature. But the idea is that you'll take the psychedelic drug and it'll open you up to this alternate, let's just call it reality. You call it alternate plane, the spiritual universe. And all of these people claim to have seen the exact same type of things, like, oh, we have these demonic looking elves, or I see like little fairies, or I see like they're all described like essentially like the exact same things. And the people who use this claim that, oh, these are just manifestations of our own mind, because apparently this drug, I guess, hyper uses like a part of your brain that is used to induce hallucination. So everyone just believes that these things that they're seeing and that these beings that they're talking to are just all in their head. It's not really real. It's just, it's all, oh, that was just a bad trip that I had there, right? And there was this one video, I can't play it here because it'll definitely get claimed because it's a Comedy Central video, but it's this one guy, I want to make sure I get his name right, I'll tell you guys here in a second, but he was talking about the fact that, he is a big person who's into like DMT and stuff like that, so he was talking about his experiences, on acid and psychedelics, and apparently every time he goes to this, psychedelic world, he comes in contact with what he likes to call the Purple Lady, and the Purple Lady like knows him, it seems to be very, very attached to him. And, he talks about his experience, like, with this woman. And there was one time he was talking with this woman. By the way, his name is Shane Mouse. So thank you for bringing that up. Shane Mouse is his name. And he was talking about, how, oh, yeah, I found a girl. I started dating a girl. And all of a sudden, this Purple Lady got very, very hostile towards the idea that, he was dealing with another woman. And it's like, am I not enough a woman for you? And stuff like that. Keep in mind, he thinks that this is all in his head. That it's all just a weird, bad trip, right? Well, here's what happened. his buddy decided that he was going to take DMT with him one day, but he took the drug first. So keep in mind, he's not on DMT at this point, but his buddy is. And while his buddy is having this experience, he just so happens to mention, it's like, oh yeah, hey Shane, there's this giant purple lady here, and apparently she knows you, right? So his friend came in contact with the exact same being, and they were literally talking about him and his trip. Keep in mind, he's totally sober at this moment, and he just thought that it was like this weird like experience and whatnot. At no point does it ever click in these people's head that, oh, maybe this isn't some kind of weird experience that I'm having right now. Maybe this actually is an entity that we're both communicating with through the use of these drugs, right? Never flashes on anyone's mind that, hey, maybe there's something wrong here. There's a little I guess you can call this an advertisement here, but there was a movie that I saw earlier this year called Caviar. Now, Caviar is a terrible film. I recommend watching it just for some of the things that are in there, but just keep in mind it is a terrible movie. But the idea here is that it's sort of this movie that plays with a lot of conspiracy theories that we talk about here today. But they did bring up one thing which has been confirmed numerous times about how our governments, and this is going back to like the 50s and 60s. It's not talking about like recently, but our governments used to experiment with psychedelic drugs. They would do drug trips. There's some days they would even like, stop somebody's heart and then like bring them back to see what kind of experiences they would have and whatnot. And during the course of these trials, they started talking to, let's just call them other beings from what they believe to be the spiritual realm. And in the course of talking to these beings, at first they thought the same thing. It's like, oh, we're just having a bad trip, crazy experiences, until they realized that these beings were relaying messages to them. And they were having these conversations with these beings through the use of these psychedelic drugs. And what happened was that these beings started to give them equations, which are essentially blueprints of technology that was far advanced than any technology a human being can come up with. So they started to adopt this technology into essentially the stuff that we use today, which is very alarming if you look at kind of the rise of things like AI that we're seeing being fast forwarded right now. A lot of these technology based into these central bank digital currencies, which a little bit of a teaser here. We'll talk about that next week on the podcast. But they were admitting that, the government had been talking to these beings, all the time. However, it did come at a cost, because even though they were getting these information from these beings, there was something that these beings wanted in return for this information. And I'm not going to tell you exactly what it is yet, because we're going to build up to it here in just a little bit. But so when we were listening to the guy earlier, the guy from Canada, talking about how him and other government entities have been in contact with quote unquote aliens over the course of the last few years, and they were giving them the relaying this information to him, telling him that your Earth is in danger, that your Earth is being polluted, and you have too many people. You got to depopulate because there's just way too many people. You guys are going to die. It's like, that's why I say I do believe that he had these conversations, because it's been admitted many times throughout the last few decades that government officials have had talks with what they like to call gods or beings or aliens, whatever you want to say, who have relayed information to them. And they do believe that these are real beings that they're talking to here. So you're starting to see a trend of what we believe to be alien, like Independence Day or Mars attacks or something like that, is really something far more sinister happening behind the scenes there. But let me ask you guys this question, because we do have a little article that I want to read just real quick before we move on to that. What is your view, or you have any experiences with psychedelic drugs in the way it is kind of viewed generally, or do you have like any real estimation about this? I'll start with Sam.
Yes. I've never done drugs before.
No, what are drugs?
But have you ever heard of it, like basically like what's your view of like psychedelics or like anything like that?
I've heard of them.
All right, the Christian, I'll go ahead and relay that same question to you.
Yeah, drugs are fun. Just kidding. Yeah, I mean, I had a good time, but like, I'm being real. But here's the thing, right? It says in the Bible, don't alter your mind. And like, I took a psychology class one time, and I learned that schizophrenia comes from taking too much drugs, so I stopped.
Yeah, because when you start seeing things and contacting things that you can't really tell if it's actually in your mind or not, they tend to drive you just a little bit crazy. It's almost as if the human mind isn't meant to.
So
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say from like, you know, personal experience, but like, don't laugh, Samantha. I can't handle it. I'm
Laughing at the
sweating over here.
comment, not laughing at you.
Okay. Like the reason why God says don't alter your mind is because it gives a gateway to the demonic, and it creates a portal, and it gives permission for the demonic to possess you. Even when you become drunk, like with alcohol, like that's like another thing. I mean, I could talk about this is like a different topic for another day, Jacob, but that's one of the biggest reasons why I stopped.
All right. Well, like I said, we'll leave it at that. I can leave that conversation for another day. Rylan,
Yeah,
what's
it's
your?
interesting.
I have I've been to concerts with people and who have been on those things, and here's the only, like, I guess I wouldn't say the good part about it, but I wouldn't say it's a bad part. Um, Nobody in any shape or form on any substances like that are looking for any conflict like they would on alcohol. Everybody is kind of like, if you walk by somebody and they're kind of like passing you, and they kind of cut you off or something, like they're the first person to turn around and be like, I'm sorry. And maybe that's a little paranoia in that sense. But nobody in there has been hostile, and maybe that's a way of letting things in and being, I guess, not comfortable but also like vulnerable, or thinking you're the problem. So I mean, it's tough because like there's been I've read things about like, I mean, obviously you hear of philosophers all the time, Aristotle and all these people would literally take ergot and then come up with democracy, come up with come up with all these different things. So like I've like come into contact with people on them, and like they're nothing but pleasant, but at the same time I don't know if that's a good thing or just a way of them feeling like they're the problem, so they have to apologize for everything. Angels don't really tell you have to apologize because you're saved.
Yeah, I saw somebody else do drugs one time. I went to a concert in Columbus, Ohio. It was like a rave, and this dude was so out of it. I don't know. I think it was demonic possession. I don't know what it was, but he like had like the strength of like 10 dudes. Like he had to have 5 guys restrain him and push him down. But he was on something. I'm gonna go ahead and assume psychedelics. So I think there's some level of violence there. The day after, I mean, you might not see it while people are on the drugs, but the day after, the come down is insane. Like you're going to see the worst version of people. So I wouldn't say it's the pleasant experience that you see some people have at raves. Maybe some people do have a pleasant experience at raves, but you're not seeing the after effects unless you're there multiple days. But
I want to add on to that. That's so true. Like, I don't know if this is super dark, but I'm gonna add into it.
Do it.
I've known somebody who's honestly committed suicide because the come down of the drugs that he was on. It can be really bad, and I know somebody else who did acid for the first. I know a lot of people who've done acid, but like one guy in particular did acid for the first time, and we couldn't find him for 2 weeks, and he was like just in the corner of his bedroom, and it was just like so creepy. So I feel like it's not obviously something you should ever do. And everyone's brain is different in the way you're chemically are, made up, and everyone doesn't, react the same way, but that's just something going on to submit this stuff too.
Also, by the way, I've listened to lead singer of Pink Floyd. What's his name? Anyway,
yeah, I know you're talking about. Yeah, I can't think of it.
So he was talking about how Sid Barnett, who was, I believe, the bassist or the drummer of Pink Floyd, basically did so much acid that he became a different person, and like shaved his head. And they kind of talk to him still a little bit just to keep in touch with him and like, be there for him. But yeah, no, like he completely flipped his own like mindset. I mean, he's schizophrenic now. Like I said, shaved his head, completely different personality. So it happens, and like people can literally like just, I mean, do so much that you just don't. You're not even yourself anymore. And in my eyes, that's turning away from who God made you to be.
Yeah. So, it's not exactly funny, but this is something that we've kind of brought up for quite some time here. And I honestly, truly do believe that drug use, especially certain types of drugs, opens you up to demonic possession. And I've seen this with a lot of people, and you've probably seen videos of this on social media too, how when people take like especially the psychedelic type drugs or like those synthesized like marijuana type stuff where there's a really intense mental reaction to taking them, and I've noticed that the people who do that, they sort of react as if they're under attack, right? And everyone kind of like looks at that person, thinks that, oh, that shit, like I said, oh, it's just a bad trip. He's just, can't handle, his drugs and nothing like that. But the way that they react, they literally look like they're being attacked by something that they can see that nobody else can see, right? And no one, I think, only a few people ever put that together. It's like, what if these people are being attacked by something invisible that we can't see? Maybe they are trying to literally fighting off demons that can only be seen throughout their mind, because they've opened themselves up through the use of these drugs to something that's very, very sinister here. And here we all know that the fentanyl epidemic in this country is really, really bad. Here's a video that was circulating on social media not too long ago, and it's gonna be tough to watch. So I mean, but these are people who are high on certain drugs here, and you can just see like from their reaction, it's like these people just aren't there. Like you can just tell by the way that these like people are just like reacting. It's almost like they're either been possessed or whatever going on upstairs has just been completely like wiped off from them. And I think what's happening here is that a lot of these drugs have been popularized, especially in media, in movies and TV shows and music and stuff like that. And people kind of get into it under this guise that it's cool, and they don't really understand the severity of what they're opening themselves up to, and don't understand the severity of like we were saying with Demi Lovato earlier. It's like you think that it's all fun and games until you've let something in that you can't get back out. Like we've heard the story of Legion in the Bible, this entity that it wasn't just one demon that was possessing this guy, it was multiple demons. It was like they were saying, it's like we are many, right? And you see a lot of these people kind of like reacting to the sense of, I don't know exactly what's gotten in or what exactly you left in, but it's almost impossible to get rid of, which is concerning when you have things like this. I'm going to bring this up here. There's a push now to legalize psychedelics, and it's being pushed by some of the most popular people in pop culture at the moment. Aaron Rodgers, who's now the quarterback of the New York Giants, has been talking and popularizing the use of psychedelic drugs for the last few years, talking about how it's made him more spiritual, how it's made him essentially change like his fabric of life. And he's out here doing these conferences, and they're trying to promote this so that it's more acceptable to society. So it's this idea, and I know there's a lot of libertarians listening to this. There's like, they think that all drugs should be legalized, but psychedelics, DMT, Oxycontin, I think it might be the same thing here. This is the type of stuff that they're trying to promote here. And let me go here. Yeah, Aaron Rodgers touted the use of these drugs in a conference back in June, celebrating the use of Oxycontin, saying that it's one of these drugs that's converted to a tea or type of liquid, and it causes life-altering experiences, causes you to intense hallucinations, stuff like that. Now, he says that, it's hard to cancel me because for the prior year, 26 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. This is what he said at a conference. I don't know why this is relevant. He says that we had a good season, Oxycontin, 48 touchdowns, MVP. What are you going to say? So he's essentially saying that his success on the football field is directly linked to the use of these drugs, which is why that we need to regulate and legalize this so that it can be widely used by the overwhelming majority of people. Now, we ask this question here: why does it seem like that the government all of a sudden is not legalizing, but normalizing this idea of aliens? That, hey, we have aliens, we're starting to see more aliens, and that they're out there, we need to be keeping an eye of it. Now, you can say that this could be used as an excuse for the rapture if people start disappearing and whatnot, and then they need an excuse like, oh, aliens took them, nothing that we can do. But let's look at it from the other perspective. What if, through the use of these drugs, through the use of the popularization of witchcraft, the popularization of the occult, that more and more people are having experiences where they're being in contact with these demonic entities, and in a way to kind of pass this off? Because, I mean, like I said, we can't believe in this idea that demons are actually real, because if demons are real, what does that mean? That means that God is real. We can't have people believing that God and Jesus Christ are actually real, so what are we going to tell them? Oh, they're just aliens. So all these contacts that people are having, oh yeah, you just had a contact with an alien being. It's like, oh really? Because I feel like I want to kill myself now because I got so terrified from this contact that I've had here. And we're like I said, you talk about fast forwarding into Revelation. I mean, there's a specific line in Revelation, which I'll bring up here in a second, that says that there's literally going to be a day where demons rise upon the earth, and they're literally going to torment people to the point where they want to die and they can't. Like, that's a horrifying thing, and we're seeing so many bad doors being opened here as a result of this. But let me just ask you real quick, Blake, what do you think about this idea of trying to legalize these type of drugs that could open you up to demonic possession or oppression faster than anything else that we've talked about here on the show so far?
I fortunately never had to do drugs. You know, I was offered it once by my friends in 8th grade at the pool, and I said, nuh-uh, and I biked back home and told my mom.
Smart kid.
I wish I was a little smarter at the time, but at least in that moment, I had a redeeming quality. But to answer your question, yeah, I think in 12th grade in language arts, we did those debates where you have to pick a side, whether you believe in it or not. And I think I chose or was chosen for the legalization of weed. And I did take this stance for the hospitals to use it. But of course, I knew in my mind that by legalizing it medically, we are also opening a door for many people to abuse that. As my uncle, I should have thought about that. My uncle is crazy. He's just always been kind of half screwed in light bulbs since he was a child. But for almost 10 years now, he had basically locked himself inside a house in Phoenix, Arizona that my grandma owns. He lives in there, possibly rent-free. He just got evicted a few months ago. But even before then, my grandma was both enabling him out of niceness and trying to just very not assertively get him out of there. Finally worked. My dad and I convinced her, and I can see the horrible damages that just weed alone, not even other psychedelic drugs that are on a much higher scale. They say that weed is just the gateway drug, but the gateway drug itself is quite trouble itself. And I've seen him have crazy paranoias. I've seen him throw temper tantrums and have hissy fits and cry in front of me and my dad when we spent the night there. It was very strange. He overall is just an addict to sugar and salt and stuff, including my other friend that I grew up with. And I've seen for sure how when someone tells you not to do something, and it's usually for a good reason, when you do it, in the case of any kind of substance abuse, food, drugs, I've seen those consequences reap. And unfortunately, I don't really talk to my childhood friend. We have no contact with my uncle anymore. Last time we heard, he was swearing at my grandma on the phone at how horrible she is for not allowing him to live in her house and just smoke prescribed weed. Okay. But at the same time, I've seen on the other hand, I've seen what a sober mind can fall into as well. My dad drinks very, very lightly. He doesn't really get drunk or anything. He's never not sober minded, and he's super smart. But it's still so possible for demons and spirits to convince you what you should believe in, and for him to not have the Holy Spirit and to be convinced in a logical mind by the demonic possession of others and how they like secondhand source into his mind.
Yep.
So I definitely am one to say that psychedelic drugs, just don't even go near them. I have a small story to tell about a PlayStation game called LSD Dream Emulator. I won't go super into it right now so other people can talk, but essentially, y'all in the audience, look it up. Google image LSD Dream Emulator. And you might even want to watch a video of someone else playing it. But it is the weirdest game I've ever seen. It's like horrible PlayStation 1 graphics, but you're in like a map of a face going in this maze of rooms. And every time you touch something, it changes rooms and the textures get all like trippy and stuff. And like creatures walk around, and there's one room where just like a giant face is looking at you as the wall.
Yeah.
And there have been some like symbols and signs in the moon and faces in the sky, and it's a very, very weird game. And I've seen kind of my own experience of what a trip would look like. And it definitely, like you said, tests the spirits. And whoever was making that game, I haven't done enough research behind the scenes. But all of these drugs, games, video games, media, movies, it all points towards the central idea that there are definitely unclean spirits that people who are not baptized in the Holy Spirit cannot discern. And so they just fall into it.
Yep.
And I've seen that on...
Because let's be honest, people who don't read the Bible are not going to notice any of the warning signs. If you're completely spiritually blind, then when you hear certain things or you see certain things, you're just going to think that, oh, okay, well, this must just be, there has to be some kind of rational explanation for this that has nothing to do with any kind of spirituality. But it's like, it's literally, this stuff has been warned about for many, many years. And I'm going to go ahead and read this verse here because this is what we were talking about earlier. This is Revelation 9:1-6. And this is essentially what we're talking about here. Now, this is essentially during the time of God's wrath upon the world, which is predicted in the end times. And here, this is the fifth trumpet of God's wrath, where locusts from the bottomless pit. So it says here that the fifth angel sounded, and I saw a star fall from heaven onto the earth, and to him was given the key to the bottomless pit. And then he opened the bottomless pit, and smoke arose out of the pit like the smoke of a giant furnace. And so the sun and the air were darkened because of the smoke from the pit, and then out of the smoke came locusts upon the earth, and they were given the power as the scorpions on the earth were given power. They were commanded not to harm the grass on the earth or anything green or any tree, but only the men who do not have the seal of God on their forehead. So this is essentially the unbelievers, maybe the people who have accepted the mark of the beast, and they were not given the authority to kill them. However, they were given authority to torment them for 5 months. Their torment was like of a scorpion when he strikes a man, and in those days men will seek death and they will not find it. They will desire to die, and death will flee from them. So it's literally saying that the unbelievers in the last day will be tortured to death from what we can assume, or what is being described here as locusts from the bottomless pit. But a lot of people have also said that that's kind of coded language from opening the pit to the abyss. Literally, demonic spirits will rise on earth and torture the unbelievers, the ones who don't have the seal of God, the ones who still reject Christ, and they will be the ones who suffer the most. And even when they want to die, they won't be able to die. That's how bad the torture is going to be in those last days.
Yeah, it's truly crazy that the leaders of our society want to open us up to like drugs that essentially open up a portal, a very like clear portal to demonic activity. I've had my own experiences where my friends think they're demonically possessed after like getting on a bad trip or whatever. And it's just insane. And then you see Aaron Rodgers like blaming or like giving credit to ayahuasca for 48 touchdowns in a season, almost like someone would if they made a deal with Satan, right, to give them like football skills or whatever. And
I mean, Tom Brady's wife is admitted to be a witch, and he's won 7 Super Bowls, so I'll just let you believe what you want there.
And the leaders of our society are over here like promoting drugs, like promoting gateways to demons, And we see in Revelation, like, what demons are going to do. They're going to torment people for 5 months. But it makes you ask the question, like, why are they doing that? And it's likely because the deals that our leaders made with these same demons, whether that was through drugs or what have you, likely include terms where the leaders are rewarded if they lead others to make similar deals with demons. Because, at the end of the day, Satan wants to be God. That was the original sin. Like, oh, if you eat of this tree, you'll become like God. But what was the result of it? I mean, we were led into a world like ruled by Satan because he wants to be the object of worship. He was God's highest angel, and then it got to his head and he rebelled, brought a third of the angels with him, and he wants as many humans to worship him as possible as well. And promoting drugs, promoting just straight up demon worship or satanic activity is, I guess, a good way to do that.
Yeah. And so I wanted to finish up here with one last point before we wrap things up, because this is where everything's going to come full circle here. Now, this is a meme from an atheist that I read earlier this week, but it actually plays perfectly into what we're talking about here tonight. I'll bring this up for you. So this is kind of like this idea that you get from a lot of atheists, where God is just a mean, nasty God. He's not really the good guy in this whole scenario. And I think when we're talking about the course of the night, how people have opened themselves up to demons. And one thing that we don't really talk about a lot is that they talk about I guess sucking themselves into the doctrine of demons and the belief of demons, because a lot of these people, they hate God so much, it's almost as if they've taken the hatred that the fallen angels and the demons have for God, and basically use their motivation or whatever, their hatred of him, and kind of espouse that out into like their world. So these people are just as angry about stuff like this, like the actual victims or of the flood essentially in Genesis was here. But I want to talk about this little portion here. So keep in mind, this is an atheist meme, and it says here that if you if you worship a God that drowns his children for being disobedient, you have no right to criticize my moral standards. So it's this idea of, oh, God would drown the entire world because people wouldn't listen to him. Like, he's such a bad person. If anyone ever makes this argument to you, right off the bat, they've pretty much let you know that they have no concept of the Bible whatsoever. I'm just going to let you guys know that now. If someone's actually, and I've heard many people who self-proclaim Satanists and atheists use this whole thing. It's like, oh, God drowned the world. He's such a terrible person. You guys don't understand exactly why he did that in the first place. So let's go ahead to our last question. Who are the Nephilim? So people think that, oh, God just drowned the entire world because people weren't listening to him. They were just being disobedient. That's not fair. That's not exactly what happened. So if you go back and you read Genesis 6, which pretty much explains what happens with the wickedness and the judgment of man, it describes a time where the Son of Men, the Son of God, which are often referred to as either angels or fallen angels, and we can assume in this case that this were fallen angels, is that they started to mingle and have relationships with human women, and they went as far to take some of these women as their wives. So when they impregnated these women and these women bore their children, they gave birth to what was named the Nephilim, who were this half-human, half-fallen angel hybrid who resembled giants. And when we're talking about giants, we're talking about beings that are described in the Bible anywhere from about 36 feet tall to like 150 feet or 450 feet tall. So these were like massive, massive beings here, right? And what happened was that these giants, these Nephilim, started to terrorize the world to the point where there was nothing that regular humans can do to satisfy them. They couldn't satisfy their hunger because they were these massive beings. So they decided that they were going to start feasting on human flesh. They started to eat the people, and they started to kill the men that were on the world. So God realized what was going on here, and he pretty much promised great punishment on not only the fallen angels who had relationship with these women, but the earth itself, because now you had these beings that were roaming the earth that were destroying his creation and threatening to destroy what he had built for all this time. So this is where you jump over to Genesis 7, and it talks about the story of Noah. And Noah obviously built the ark, got the animals around, and then God proceeded to flood the earth. Well, if you don't tell people exactly why he flooded the earth, people just think, oh, why would he do something like that? There was a reason. But people, though there's not a whole lot of talk about the Nephilim during that time, because it assumed that, oh, well, he flooded the earth and all the people who were in there died, they drowned. Some of them did survive. As we talk about later on, we talk about David and Goliath. There were still some Nephilim there. Goliath was a giant, so not all of them died, but obviously the ones that were causing the major problems did. Now, there's the belief that the Nephilim that died during the floods, because they were half man and because they were half angels, even though they died, their spirits still remained. However, because of the sins that were caused by the angels, the sins that were caused by the men, there was no way whatsoever that these spirits were ever going to be invited back into the kingdom of heaven. God made it very, very clear that he was not going to forgive these fallen angels. So this is where we get the existence of hell. And the existence of hell is that this was punishment for Lucifer and the third of the angels that rebelled against God, rebelled against the kingdom. They were all sent to hell. So these spirits were also sent to hell as well. Well, because these spirits had grown used to, I guess, attaching themselves to human torment, human suffering, and yes, even human flesh, that these spirits that from the Nephilim we now believe to be demonic spirits of today. So the spirits that started attacking men even after their deaths, the ones that were possessing people in the Old Testament and the New Testament, that I believe that this is the origin from these Nephilim spirits. Now, I will exercise a little bit of caution here, because I do want to quote one thing from the book of Enoch. Now, look, the book of Enoch, I know there's going to be a lot of split on here. I'm going to go ahead and let you guys know. There's a reason why this book is not in the Bible, right? There's a reason why this book isn't in the Bible, and the reason why is because, one, they don't believe that Enoch actually wrote the book, so there's no way to verify who actually wrote this book. And during a certain point of the book, it goes as far to claim that Enoch was somehow the Christ rather than Jesus himself, which we all know to be blasphemous. So all I have to say is that take this with a grain of salt. Do not try to adopt the book of Enoch in your theology or anything like that. There's a reason why it's not in the Bible. But I do find this very fascinating here, because this does give supposedly some insight on the fallen angels, and there is a belief here that this book was written in some way by fallen angels, because who else could have known this type of information outside of them, which is, like I said, there's a reason why this book isn't in the Bible. But essentially what happens here is that they talk about the fact that, yes, these fallen angels did have wives with human women. They lusted after them. They bared child. They even named some of them. I'm not going to name them for the obvious reasons here, but it talks about how these fallen angels, when they mingled with human women, when they mingled with humans in general, that they gave them information that they shouldn't have given human beings, because essentially they taught them how to use charms. They teach them enchantments, which was basically witchcraft. They teach them how to cut roots. They teach them how to become acquainted with like the plant. So it's a belief that the fallen angels gave the humans that were on the earth at this time information, and this is kind of the inspiration for a lot of pagan practices, a lot of pagan worship that we see when we talk about the worship of false gods like Baal and Moloch and Asherah. That that's pretty much how a lot of this originated. But what we see here, of what is described in Enoch, is that these demons or fallen angels, however you want to call them, that they were essentially communicating with humans and giving them information and technology that they know that they weren't supposed to have, and essentially led to human destruction, right? Because anything that what they were doing is that they were leading people to essentially rebel directly against God and directly against God's command. As we see here, this is going all the way back to Genesis. So if this is happening in Genesis, you can only imagine what stuff like this is happening today in modern times, and we don't think about stuff in modern times throughout that lens. But this whole idea of demons, fallen angels communicating with humans, giving them information on technology that they can't even comprehend. And a lot of these people, humans, view them as gods, view them as higher beings that they're communicating with, and you communicate with them the use of astral projection, obviously certain type of psychedelic drugs. So you're seeing a pattern here throughout the course of this night that when you talk about making contact with something that's not heavenly, and we all kind of view it as the acceptable lens of, oh, these have to be aliens because we don't believe in these certain beings. Well, guess what? The Bible has warned that these beings have been in contact with men for a very, very long time. And whenever they get in contact with humans, nothing good usually happens. And it usually leads to the downfall of man. And here we are so many years later, and you can argue just how close we are to Revelations. But it talks about in the last days, there's going to be a great falling away from the church, a great falling away from God. There's going to be a great concentration of non-believers. And we're seeing that right here, right now. And all I'm saying is for those of you guys fantasizing or romanticizing this idea of alien contact and getting in contact with these spiritual beings that you think are going to give you this real cool information and that you're going to have a great time, all I'm telling you is that you're setting yourself up for your own destruction. And the warnings have been there for many, many years. But as we said earlier, when you reject Genesis, you reject a lot that comes with Genesis. You reject all the warnings of these specific instances happening. And then here you are years later, and now we're talking about alien contact. But we have to ask ourselves, is this truly aliens, or is this basically the same playbook that we've seen since Genesis being repeated now in modern times? So I'll go ahead and kind of give you your final thoughts on kind of the topic of the Nephilim here and wrap it up with aliens. Our start with Johnny. What's your final thoughts on kind of this whole thing here?
My final thoughts. So Duke Nukem asked a few times in the chat, like whether folks believed in the reptilians or the Greys, and I think it's like certainly a possibility that maybe those entities are real. Maybe they're straight up demons, or maybe they're the result of, fallen angel, and human reproduction, right? Like we see later in the Bible, David killing Goliath. Like Goliath is a remnant from fallen angels, like reproducing with men, and when I think about the Nephilim, one of the questions I always like to think about is, why did God have to kill them? And clearly they were disobeying, but I also think it goes as far as Jesus's sacrifice wouldn't have covered the sins of the Nephilim. They're no longer human.
Well, there's actually a theory that goes with that, and it was saying that it wasn't just the fact that the Nephilim were attacking humanity, but it was the fear that if the Nephilim multiplied to a part where everyone would have been part Nephilim in some way, shape, or form, then it would have been that Jesus, when Jesus would essentially come to be the savior of the world, if everyone was part of this fallen angel bloodline, there was no possible way that they could be redeemed, because like I said, God was not going to forgive the fallen angels who rebelled against them. So that was another motivation for the flood, to get rid of that bloodline so that we wouldn't be tainted by it.
Right. And I wonder if, somewhere along the lines of the alien deception, where they're going to start promoting, transhumanism, like, oh yeah, just put this chip in your brain, or put this mRNA in your genome and change your DNA so you're smarter, better, stronger, taller. Now, all of a sudden, like, that looks a whole lot like the mark of the beast. And we know from the book of Revelation that the people with the mark of the beast aren't saved. And personally, I believe that's kind of like an end times manifestation of this, like, Nephilim bloodline sort of deal. And if you're not human, you're not saved by the fully human, fully God sacrifice of Jesus Christ.
Yep. And like I said, the warnings are there. You just gotta listen. Sam, we haven't heard from you in a little bit. What do you think of this whole situation?
Yeah, I mean, I stay prayed up, because what's coming is a lot. I think we've been set up for this for a little bit, and the only way to stay out of deception is to stay on your word. So those are my 2 cents. I'm just going to leave it at that and encourage everybody, even if you're not Christian, to just crack open a Bible. see what's in it.
Back a physical copy, not one of these online copies, because we'll talk about next week. That might not be an option in the near future. So physical Bibles
Yes,
are going to
sir.
be very important. Chris, what do you think about this? Great. Rylan, what do you think about this whole situation?
I mean, just piggybacking off what Sam said, if you really want the truth, go crack open that physical Bible. I mean, it's it's got everything you need to know in it, and
yeah.
Listening to MSNBC, Rachel Maddow, and Anderson Cooper ain't going to get you anywhere other than closer
Hell.
to hell. So, yeah.
Just kidding.
Hey, Chris, you're back.
That's just any major news source, by the way. Just putting that out there.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think Chris can hear us right now. But Blake, what do you think about this? Final thoughts on kind of like the aliens, Nephilim, and stuff like that. So go ahead, get the floor.
I second everything that was said. Oh, I don't even know. Wait, what name did you say?
We'll start with Blake, and then we can end with Chris.
Okay. I just say what Sam says. Like, if you haven't done it in a while, if you haven't done it before, crank open a Bible, learn how to actually read it, to see Jesus on every page and see how the whole scripture revolves around him. And when you do not center it around him as the holder of all things, you're going to come up with your own theories, and you're going to come up with a heart that does not seek him. So seek him, read his word, and then just use that lens to watch what's going on today, because that is the most sound mind way to live in this 21st century world. And that sound mind, like we said, only comes from the Spirit of God, not from the other spirits of them. So yeah, that's all I have to say.
Yeah, make sure you guys are reading your own Bibles, for yourself. Don't have the church read the Bible for you, Catholics. Christians,
assuming churches can read the Bible still.
Yeah, that too. Christian, what's your final thoughts on kind of this whole alien topic that we've been having here tonight?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of cool, honestly, overall, just to see that. I feel like I'm watching a movie. I'm part of a real life movie, and it's kind of fun. Yeah, just grab a bag of popcorn. Because you never know what's going to happen next.
And there's a...
Biggles is good, people.
Yeah. But I've had one Joe Rogan podcast talking about, just like he had a segment where they were just talking about like COVID and the politics. And he's not a believer, but he had a I think he's getting there. I think he's slowly getting there. But anyway, that's another topic. But he had a quote. He was like, "Nancy Pelosi ain't your mama. Donald Trump's not your dad. Like we need to quit putting our trust in these people who clearly don't have the best interest for us." So anyway, trust in the Lord. And that's pretty much all you can do at this point.
Yeah, that's the other thing too. It's like when you get closer and closer to like biblical truth, when you start seeing a lot of things that go on in the world, when it's like politics, especially when you realize just how divisive it is. I mean, it's basically an avenue for discord and strife, which are things that are openly professed against in the Bible. But when you really look at it from a bigger perspective of not just Democrat or Republican or even like liberal conservative, like even the bigger scheme of things, it's like you realize it's a battle between good and evil. That's what it really comes down to. Like all the other labels really don't matter at the end of the day when you look at the real big picture of what's going on here. And so yeah, Joel Martinez here has a great verse from Genesis 19 through 33 as well. So hey, look, if you guys listening to the show want a little history lesson, go back and reread the book of Genesis. We've mentioned it multiple times throughout the course of this night. If you want to understand some truths there, just go back and read that one, and don't listen to people like Neil deGrasse Tyson who came out today talking about that. Our idea of XX and XY chromosomes or you guys are the problem because you don't think that genders on a spectrum. It's like these are the people who convinced you that God wasn't real, by the way. I just want you to remember that. At the end of the day, these are the people who convinced you that Genesis was a lie, and now they're arguing about whether gender should be on a spectrum or whether you feel 80% male one day and 20% female the next day. It's like guys, the truth has been there for quite some time. All you have to do is go back and read it. So my final thoughts on this one. If they're like we said with the COVID thing, we had this whole narrative on the anti-vax situation not too long ago, and then next thing you know, jabby time happened. So if they're hyping up this whole idea of aliens and they're real and they're here, we're making contact, we may start seeing more of them. What I would say is that they're probably prepping you for something, and if the government's prepping you for something, it's not going to be very, very good. So take the time that you have now to read up on biblical truth, because who knows how much time we all have left at the end of the day. It could be sooner, could be later, could be 2 months, could be 5 years, could be 10 years, but time's running out. That's all I have to say. And while you have,
Can I add something, real Jacob?
go ahead.
Just want to say this real quick. This is probably a really smart time to prepare because we don't know what's going to happen, right? We don't know. I literally don't know what's going to happen. So if you could, I would say get rice and beans and like have a place of protection and like shelter, because if quote unquote aliens do come, and who knows what the government has planned out, you just never know. That's all I have to say. I just feel like I had to say that.
No, it's always wise to be prepared. I would say food, ammunition, an alternative power source off the electrical grid, medicine. So
Gold.
yeah, I know that's prepper talk, and people get a little bit uneasy when you talk about that stuff. But it's like it's better than have it and not need it than need it and not have it. That's all I like to say. So
I would say have a plan put into place and know who your allies are.
Mm-hmm.
Just saying, I don't know. We literally don't know, but it's good to have like a plan. If you've watched any Will Smith movie, at least they had a plan.
Well, look, hopefully this episode opened your eyes on some few things that you may not have known before, and hopefully it leads you to check out some sources that you may not have considered before as well. So like I said, if you want to read back on a lot of this stuff, read Genesis, and then when you start reading Genesis, a lot more things are going to start making sense to you about how we got here.
Revelation.
Yeah, start off with Genesis first. Don't start off with Revelation, because you're going to be terrified and it's not going to make a whole lot of sense. So, I mean, look, if you're going to start reading the Bible, I would always say start with Matthew, then go to Revelation, then go back to the Old Testament to figure out why we needed Jesus in the first place, because then it'll start making a lot of sense that way. But, I mean, hey, starting with Genesis is a good start too. So, I mean, there you go. Machismo joining us in. He said, made it. What's Gucci, my ninjas? Yes. Very, very
I thought I said my papa for a second.
No, it's also I said Will Smith had a plan for the oh god, let's not bring up Will Smith. Let's not bring up Will Smith right now.
That's Revelations. Yeah, I did too, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I think
like
Revelations are a really interesting book.
Yeah, like I said, I started with Matthew and made my way back to Revelations. Like I said, Revelations is very interesting. You can look at a lot of things that are going on now. It's like I think we're a lot closer than this than a lot of people probably want to know. So. Yep. That will work for you. So next Monday night here on the Bible Lens podcast, we'll be back here for episode 4, and our debate will be our next topic. I do want to talk about the Antichrist and who I believe the Antichrist is, and it's probably going to make some people upset about who I think it is, Duke Nukem. But before I start that's 2 weeks from now. I want to talk about one other important topic that I think we should be discussing here, and it's the role of AI in the end times. And I also want to talk about not only AI, but this rise of central bank digital currencies, because we're seeing pretty much every world government, even from the United States to Russia, kind of fast forwarding and rushing this idea of an all digital currency that is controlled by the government. And like I said, if you're talking about prepping for the disaster, prepping for the end, now would probably be a good time to do it, because with the information of what AI can do right now versus what it can possibly do in the next few years, plus the information of central bank digital currencies, you talk about market of the beast type stuff. I think we could be looking at that very, very quickly here. So before I go ahead and sign off, I'm going to give all you guys a chance, you lovely group of people here who all look very happy to be here at the moment, just staring at all your faces. I'm going to give you a chance to promote anything that you guys want to promote for our next episode. And I'm going to start up with the lovely wet hair Chris. What do you got coming up? Anything you want to throw out to the people?
No. But it's been fun.
You
That
don't
look
have
away was
anything
very
that you want to.
convincing.
Oh no, I'll just go ahead and put your social media up on the chat here,
Yeah,
so
I
that
got
everyone
Chris
can.
Polisi.
There you go.
Oh,
That's what I was trying to
Instagram.
All right,
That's
then.
good. Yeah, I want some followers.
I don't know if you want these followers though. That might not be.
I'm friends with everyone.
My followers are kind of weird. So, and then jumping over to
No,
the next
never.
room. Jumping over to the next room is our good buddy Sam. I know you got something that you would like to promote. Maybe like a TikTok or something
Yeah,
around
my
that line.
Venmo. If you want my handle, just reach out to Jacob. You can send me money.
I said TikTok. I didn't say anything about giving you money.
What's your TikTok, Sue?
My TikTok is Sam got a TikTok.
There you go. Boom. Johnny, what do you got coming up? Oh, I see you actually prepared because you got something over there in the Substack there.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, check out my Substack. I recommend best preparation tip. You know, if you're saved, prepare a rapture letter. If you're not saved, get saved because you don't want to be around the tribulation. I've got a rapture letter template right on my Substack, so check it out.
All right, Rylan, you're up next.
Pretty much the same thing as Sam, just all social medias. I'll put that in the chat right now. Yeah, follow my Twitter if you really like the Braves, because that's pretty much what I tweet about most of the time anyway. So. The Braves, jump on, baby.
Yeah, there you go. See, one person came prepared and you got it in the chat. There you go.
Hey, how do you add your Instagram?
You use a keyboard.
And then, of course, like...
Don't follow me. This is my swamp. Y'all are cool, but you're all strangers. However,
stranger danger.
I'm honored to be following you.
If you could, y'all pray for me. I am beginning my senior student teaching this Thursday. School officially starts. I had an open house all day today. Was standing a lot in the hallways, and then in our classroom meeting a bunch of parents and kids, and that was an interesting time. Lots of different personalities of 7th graders. So I'm very stoked for that. Just pray that I can somehow stand on truth in public school and still pass college and stuff on top of student teaching, college, all that mess. So if I get raptured, if I stay here, pray for my kids, pray for me teaching them in that secular setting. And that's about all.
We love you, Blake.
Love you too.
I already know Blake's gonna get popular. I need to get him off this show. So
What did I miss?
letting you guys know what we got coming up here. So thank you for all you guys listening here tonight. Tomorrow night we're back with the Barroom Podcast with the group of heathens, as I like to call them, because they're not nearly as biblical as these people here. We're gonna be talking about some new rules that YouTube has put down, apparently telling us what we can and can't talk about here if we want to stay monetized or have our channel put up there. So we'll talk about that tomorrow. Like I mentioned earlier, Mattel has 45 movies in development now, thanks to Barbie. So we're gonna have to talk about that tomorrow as well. LeBron James's promise school, apparently not a single 8th grader has passed state math in 3 years. So we'll talk about that. Sarah Silverman is slamming actors who are working indie gigs during the strike. We're going to talk about that insufferable winch. Can we say winch? Here is that's it. We'll probably say winch. And then we'll talk about Secret Invasion director admitting that he does not care about the poor reception to his completely boring, awful Disney Plus series that he had on there that was absolutely dreadful and sucked, and no one should watch it because it was terrible. So that's my short review on Marvel, because I know that's what everyone actually came here for. So outside of that, I'm going to give a quick shout out to everyone who joined us throughout the course of the night. Leslie Tarkin, Duke Nukem joining us, Don't Let Them Burn joining us in the chat tonight, Condescending Josh, who should be editing articles right now rather than talking with me, Cold Classic Cage, who was here with us throughout the course of this night, Big Ol' Mets, obviously, for joining us in at the tail end of the show, Small Time Republic, joining us tonight. I want to make sure I got everyone a little shout out. Joe Martinez, I'm going to give a shout out to you, obviously. And I think that's everyone. So just in case I missed everyone, thank you everyone for joining us for a Monday night. Like I said, next Monday night, we're going to be talking about AI and central bank digital currencies. Tomorrow night, Barroom Podcast. And Friday night, we'll be doing a movie review on The Meg 2. So we got a lot of stuff going on this week. But until then, we're going to sign off. And like I said, if you guys were listening to what we were saying tonight and you want to know what exactly is the gospel of Jesus Christ, we will sign off here with the gospel as told by Vody Bacham. We will see you guys later. Wave to the crowd. Adios, people. Good night.
Bye. When people say, no, our problem is this, our problem is that, we say, no. Our problem is that God created the world. And God created man, and he put man in the garden to keep the garden. And he gave the man a command. And he held that man to perfect, perpetual obedience to that command. And he promised him life if he kept it, and death if he didn't. And he didn't keep it. He ate. And because he ate, because of that one man, sin entered the world, and death through sin. And everyone born from that man through ordinary generation inherited that man's sin nature. And because of that sin nature, sins proceed from it. And our world is broken because of that sin. And we stand guilty before a holy and righteous God. And we know that he's holy, and we know that he's righteous, and we crave justice. But the problem is that if God gives us justice, we all die. And so that God, in his goodness and in his mercy, sent forth his son, who was not born of ordinary generation, but was born of a virgin. Yes, the virgin birth matters. Why? Because if he's born of ordinary generation, he's born in sin. But because he's not born of ordinary generation, he's not born in sin. He's clean of sin. His record is clean. And he keeps his record clean. And he obeys God's law. And because he's fully God and fully man, he obeys the law of God on our behalf in his active obedience. And then in his passive obedience, God made him who knew no sin to be sin for us. All we like sheep had gone astray. Each of us had turned to his own way, but God laid upon him the iniquity of us all. And Christ died for sin once for all, the just for the unjust. And God imputes our sinfulness to him. And he nails our sinfulness to the tree. And Christ dies and raises again on the third day for our justification. And there's another imputation. The righteousness of Christ is actually imputed to us so that God can be both just and the justifier of the one who places faith in Jesus Christ. So that all those who come to Christ may enter in. So that all those who place faith in Christ might be saved, but not only saved, but sanctified. Because he's the firstborn of many brethren. We're justified and we're adopted into the family of God. And we're sanctified. And as his children, we begin to bear the family resemblance. And we're further sanctified throughout this life by the very same gospel that saves us. Until one day when it's all said and done, we're not just saved from the penalty of sin. We're not just saved from the power of sin, but one day we're glorified and saved from the very presence of sin. That's the gospel that we preach. That's the gospel that we need. And that's the gospel that's more than enough.